Welcome to RGBA, where we cover technology news, cool gadgets, and sometimes coffee and productivity. This is episode number 29. My name is Alexandre Valliere-Lagacé, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tade Ménard. This week, we discuss the Grand Tour, Powerline, and the macOS automation. So this week, let's start with finally Apple released a $300 MacBook. Haha, this was never made. Yeah, so Apple released a big book and a small book, both containing the same thing. Over 400 pages of Apple product shots. Basically, what they did is they started with the iMac when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and all the way up until, I think, the Apple Pencil.
The iPhone 6.
The iPhone 6? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got like 400 pages of high quality paper, superb ink, presenting all the different products. I would say 99.9% pictures, apart from the table of content at the beginning and the page numbers. There's no real text in there. So, and also it's available in two different sizes. The big one, which is $300 US, and the small one, which is $200. And it's not available everywhere. You really have to be in some countries where Apple will be selling this, and Canada is not in there.
I don't understand why. I guess it's something to do with the having to write stuff in French because of Quebec, or
there's probably a law
regulations,
for that,
or
yeah.
It's available in two sizes, so you can get it in the regular or the plus size.
Yep. But they didn't call them plus. They just said
no.
Two different
I don't
sizes.
even know why they offer it in two sizes. The small one is $199. The big one is $299 US.
Yeah.
It's available in a couple of retail stores.
Can you actually see it in the stores?
I don't know if you can browse it at the store, but it says it's available at the following US retail stores, and then it lists a bunch of stores, probably all the big city ones.
Okay.
Also, there's no writing, so there's no description of the products. It's exclusively pictures. I think they said they've been working on it for the past 8 years, trying to find old devices and to photograph.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, because Steve Jobs was not one to be known to be very prone to nostalgia and old products. He's always looking forward and not backwards. And when he came back to Apple had an history museum where they had all their devices, and he actually shipped all of those to Stanford University, where they have a proper museum there for that kind of stuff. And was he involved in that process, or was that maybe a pet project from Johnny Hive, who tried to design the book for change? After a watch, a phone, computers, devices, pencils, maybe he also tries to redesign a bunch of things and try to take something that's very common and bring it to a higher level. So maybe it was basically one of his pet projects, and it was not really under the supervision of Steve Jobs, and perhaps just something that they just wanted to do because they're like everyone at one time in your life. You kind of look backwards and you see what you accomplished, and you just want to dwell upon it a bit. And this is the perfect creation of whatever you did in the past few decades into a single memento object.
It would have been nice to have a little bit backstory of the design and the design process of every product, or a few select products.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe where the idea came from, what happens, why this the design was chosen instead of another one. So it would have been quite interesting.
And you were right. It goes all the way to the Apple Pencil. I meant
okay.
The last iPhone in the book is the iPhone 6.
Okay. We also learned this week that the head of the user automation group at Apple, Sal Sogoyan, was actually thanked for his service, if you want to put this politely. And he's not that he was fired, but that his position was abolished. So there's no one that is now heading a automation division at Apple's for macOS. So he basically started a website and started to put some information in there for people who would like to do automations on macOS. This comes at I would say at first I thought it was weird because Apple always had Automator and they always had like a bunch of Apple scripts that you could do lots of stuff with those. But I'm guessing that from the numbers that Apple has, it's probably just a very, very, very small percentage of the users who actually use those. And now that we are in a world where there's always an app for that, there's most probably an app for everything you want to do. Just for example, many years ago, I had Apple scripts to rename files. And then I discovered File Renamer, what is it called? Let me just check. File Renamer Pro, which is basically a renaming app where you have different tabs and you can replace Word. You can do regex to replace words. You can do a bunch of stuff. You can add numbers, add padding, add whatever. So this is so much powerful than me myself writing my own Apple script each and every time that I kind of understand why they went to a app model instead of continuing automations, especially if over the years this number goes down and down and down. That doesn't mean that nobody is using it. Probably some of you listeners or other very tech nerdy people have a bunch of scripts for a bunch of different tasks. And for those, that really sucks. I'm kind of hopeful because looking at where iOS is going with automation, with workflow, the workflow app, I can see the exact same thing being thrown to the macOS side. Especially that if you look at what is a workflow, it's kind of like a big plist file. If you open the file in your text editor, and it's like all different nodes and actions and stuff like that. So, and that's the same kind of way that you could also write automator scripts. So it's very similar in terms of architecture. So I would think and I would hope that the workflow guys would bring their app to the macOS ecosystem.
I've never used automation. If I had to automate something, usually I just write a shell script or something very basic.
Yeah.
It might be trying to do something with Swift, like they're doing with the playground on the Mac. Something like really simple or just a workflow app leveraging Swift, and maybe that's why his position was abolished. I don't know.
Well, there was actually some development going on with the macOS automation. I remember maybe, was it with, I think it was with El Capitan or that they brought up JavaScript as a language for the Apple script. Well, automation actions, if you want. Instead of coding in AppleScript, you could write stuff in JavaScript. So that was something that kind of brought it to a more recent crowd, a younger crowd where they did not necessarily have all the knowledge to write AppleScript. But that's like the last thing I heard about this, especially in keynotes and stuff. It was never really mentioned. So yeah, it's probably something that's going not necessarily to disappear, but popularity was certainly going down. Hopefully, if they really pull this off and remove everything from macOS, maybe in a future version there will be some alternative. Hopefully, the workflow guys would be able to do it because they're pretty awesome at what they do. So yeah, yesterday night, you throw a party, and the point of that was to watch an episode of TV.
Yep. So it's called The Grand Tour. It's not a spin-off, but it's the same show basically as Top Gear, the old BBC show. They got into a fight with the producers, or actual physical fight, and they got kicked off from the BBC. I think they went around. It's there are three guys, the three hosts. They went around Netflix and Amazon and everything, and finally they landed on Amazon. And now everything is promoted and sponsored by Amazon. And I think the main host, if you want, received a 60 million signing bonus to go to Amazon. And they signed for a 3-year deal of 30 episodes. Wow. And the first one was last night. Well, actually, it was released Thursday night for us in the US. It was released. The shows are released every night, every Friday night at 12:01 UK time. I think it's GMT. So it's like a House of Cards or whatever, but it's released actually every week.
It's still a weekly show, though.
Yeah, it's a weekly show.
Okay, so there's going to be only one episode released every week. It's not like you could binge watch the whole season.
Yeah. So if you like the old Top Gear, it's basically the same thing, except there's a couple of like specific things they can't say, but they bring a bunch of concepts over, and it's just great. It was the first show, so I found that they're trying to get into a groove. I don't know. It wasn't as smooth as the old show, but that's just, I guess it's to be expected. So new cast, not new cast. I mean, new crew, new-ish concept. So they're gonna get better as they go.
Cool. I haven't watched it yet. It's in my list. Nowadays, I have less time for TV, so all my episodes kind of pile up, but I'll get to it eventually. The old Top Gear, I was not a follower of that show, but I did watch a couple of episodes, especially the train one where there was fire and everything. So it's kind of like, it's a car show, but it's a car show plus plus. Like, you've got so much more entertainment out of it than just a bunch of old white dudes reviewing cars, like you used to see on TV for the last like 20 years or whatever. So,
And also the old show, Top Gear, used to be, they have segments and shot all over around the world, and they'd have like they call them in studio bits. So they'd interview celebrities, and then they'd not transition, but they'd set up their bit, and then they'd switch over and show the clip they filmed whatever months before.
Yeah, and they even make a racing contest with celebrities. So Rowan Atkinson,
Yeah, Mr. Bean.
does Mr. Bean, yeah. He's quite a car fanatic, and I think he got, well, the one show I've seen, he was like moved to the top position of the fastest lap. So
yeah, there's a bunch. There's Tom Cruise went, Cameron Diaz, to promote I think they had a movie with motorcycles.
okay, so it's also like a talk show kind of thing, plus with cars.
But you see, they kind of address that in the new show, but I'm not sure if they're gonna have like celebrity guests. I don't want to spoil what happened, but they talk about it, so I don't know if they're still gonna have that bit.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's probably just a budget reason for now. It probably costs, like you said, a lot of money just to get them on the show, on the network.
Well, no, I don't think it's a question of money, because once you'll see it, you'll see they don't really care about money for that thing. But I think it's just they're maybe not allowed, because I know there's a lot of stuff that they can't say, like specific words that are like copyright by the not like intellectual property of the BBC now. And there are a bunch of lawyers involved in that, and it's still ongoing. Certain things they can't say. It's like really, really specific words they can't say in certain situations because it's a BBC. So I don't know. Oh, and the Grand Tour, it's because it's a tour, they say. They're touring a tent. So instead of the in studio, they have this tent set up. So the first show is in California, and they released the second show, which is in Johannesburg. And I know the crew's been filming in Finland, Germany, and obviously the UK. So they have this big tent that they tour around the world and film everywhere. So
when is Montreal?
They're not going to Canada this year.
No?
I'm guessing they'd go to Toronto before Montreal. I don't know.
Well, we do have a F1 racing track here, so it could be used to drive around and try to make a contest of the fastest driver or something.
Well, yeah, but the racetrack is, I think it must be expensive to rent, since it's an actual street when it's on a F1 race.
Yeah, true.
But they have so much money. When you'll see the first episode, like the shots they have, it's crazy.
Okay, so money's not a problem.
I think it's like just the opening scene, I think, costs like a couple million.
Wow, that's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to be in my watching list. Probably going to skip that over to the top so I can watch it faster. Really, I'm interested with the concept and everything. And I still have a couple of episodes I downloaded from past seasons of Top Gear to watch. So I'll take a look.
It's not a car show. It's an entertainment show, and there happens to be cars.
Yeah, that's what I figured when I watched a couple episodes. But that's more accessible. It's less car specs and
No, there's none of that. Well,
people,
there's some, but
yeah, of
not
course,
a lot.
yeah. And people calling in saying, "What should I buy with this amount of money?" Like all these crap segment that I've seen on other TV shows. It's so boring, and that's especially when I change channel. But there's none of that with Top Gear, and Grand Tour seems to be even better. So
Yeah, there's no stats. They don't talk about cars that much.
great. So our friends at Apple try to change their design in California for a made in America. So we heard rumors in the past couple of years that Apple was trying to bring back manufacturing of their products to the homeland, and they did that for the Mac Pro, probably because the margins were so high on that product that it was feasible. But now they're trying to get more products made in the USA. So Apple seems to ask Foxconn and Pegatron, which are the two iPhone assemblers, to look into that and see exactly if it's feasible, and if it's feasible in, of course, in a manufacturing capacity and in a quality, and of course price wise, if it's possible to do that. So right now they say that the iPhone 7 component cost is about $220, and the base price of the phone is $649. So knowing that Apple requires large margins on their products, maybe up to 50%, it doesn't leave much to the assembly cost. $649, if you cut that in half, that's $325, and $220 is the component cost. So it's probably less than $100 of assembly fee they can probably share from the selling price. And I don't know how much it costs for Apple to manufacture in China, but it's probably a couple tens of dollars. So maybe $40, $50. So perhaps they would be able to double that cost and go to 100. But I don't think that's going to be so easy, especially with the price of setting up plants and also the capacity. They will have to have many production lanes and try to crank out millions of phones every weeks or every month. I don't know what's their planned capacity, but anyways, it's good that they look at it. I'm not sure if that's going to be feasible in the short term. Maybe it's something that they're looking into in the long term. And by asking their existing supplier, they're not in a situation where they're actually going to piss them off and they're going to run away, and no more partnership with Foxconn or Pegatron. So that's a good thing. Do you think they should do that? And do you think it's possible that in, let's say, 5 years we see an iPhone made in USA?
Yeah, maybe they want to make America great again. Okay, we don't want to go there.
I was drinking while you said that. While you were saying that.
No, but when we talk about estimate costs to the component costs for making iPhones, like how do they do that? I'm guessing Apple has like huge discounts on screens or components because they buy millions and millions of them.
Yeah.
So are they accurate? I think Tim Cook
they
said
cannot
outright,
be as accurate as they could be, because there's always the R&D cost that is never taken into account.
Yeah, but we're just talking about component. So we don't know the price of a phone, but the actual price of a phone with all the R&D included, no, but just the price of the actual components.
They can be pretty close, because component prices are kind of like an open market in Asia, and there are analysts that are looking at these kind of things and try to predict like the price drop of certain things, and that influences future products. Because let's say you make, I don't know, like a MP3 player with a screen, and you learn that OLED screens will drop price, I don't know, like 20% in the coming months. Then you quickly start thinking of integrating that into your product, so that in a few months, when you're ready to manufacture your product, your components price will be lowered and your selling price will also be lowered. So these prices are quite accurate. The only part that is not as accurate is the custom chips that they make, and probably the assembly itself, because like you say, they have partnership, and that can also affect the price. But for other parts, let's say like a Samsung provided memory, for these the price are pretty public. And even though Apple maybe ordered like 20 million sticks, they probably are able to guess what range of rebate they're getting from Samsung for that. So they say 220, maybe it's plus or minus 20 or $30, but it shouldn't be like $400. It's in the ballpark of $220.
And also, you have to, like you were saying, you have to figure in the R&D costs and marketing costs and shipping. Also, it'd be less shipping if it'd be in the States. So
yeah, that's probably why Apple keeps so large margins. Not too sure if it's profit margins or if it's margins of that they keep for all this thing, and in that remaining 50% or whatever, they have a part that they don't want to touch, which could be explained by like the recent price cut we've seen on dongles and LG screens. They probably decided to forego their profits on these things for now, just to calm the masses. And that seems to fit in the 20 to 40% range, which would make sense if we believe past rumors of Apple making up to 50% profit. So, anyways, it's always a game, and it's never perfect, but it gives you like an average that you can start thinking with that and see if it's possible or not.
Other than employing U.S. people and being able to say that the phone are made in America and all that, what's the advantage, you think? Like shipping time?
Shipping time, yes, of course.
But they'd still have to have a factory in Asia, because it'd be the same thing now. There'd be shipping constraints to ship it back into Asia to supply all China, all that stuff.
It shouldn't affect too much the end customer, but where this actually makes a lot of sense. I know the screen is made in the USA, and there's probably a bunch of other components that are made in the USA and shipped to Asia to be assembled. So by foregoing that shipment back and forth they do around the globe, first of all, you can say that you're greener because you spend a lot less on package deliveries like that, and also the assembly and the creation of components can be made closer. Imagine like a super big company park with like there's a plant for the assembly line, there's a plant for the screen, there's a plant for whatever, and everything is all integrated. Think of it as the Ford plants that they had in Detroit when they started to make the first Ford automobiles. They were receiving the raw materials from the boats, and the boats were dumping that into one Ford company owned manufacturing plant where they would transform the raw materials into metal, and then the metal was passed on in the second plant to be molded and whatever. So everything was like made by Ford. So I'm thinking that Apple is, well, at least dreaming of this kind of setup where they would get all the raw materials, or at the very least all of the parts made in the USA, shipped to one central place and then assembled there, or if possible even made in one single state, or I don't know, in the desert of Arizona or something like that, just so that everything is close together.
I think the boxes were printed in America also, no? Or something like that?
Yeah, that is the case. So these also have to be shipped to Asia. So
to be shipped back.
Yeah,
just to put a phone in them and then to ship them back.
Yeah, so it's a lot of back and forth, and it's a lot more than we think. And that's where Tim Cook was quite good in the past when he was handling all of that. But if they can simplify the whole thing, it would be even better. So for them, it was be more of a manufacturing cost delay, and may also maybe reactiveness. But for the consumer, of course, there will be a big made in the USA stamped on the back. But other than that, I don't think it will make any difference. The latest MacBook Pro with the Touch Bar is now available to pick up in certain stores. So after some delay, now you can actually go in the stores and probably pick one up and maybe even play with them in the stores. So that's a good thing.
Did you have a chance to go see the one yet?
No, not yet. Probably this weekend. I'll probably take a little stroll over there and see what they look like.
Yeah, me too. I'll go see.
We heard a rumor that Apple may be throttling the iPhone 7 LTE performance in some of the models. Apple is actually using hardware from two manufacturers, from Qualcomm and from Intel. And supposedly this exact same Qualcomm chip is in use in the Samsung Galaxy S7. And when you're actually looking at the speed of transmission of the different models of phones between the iPhone 7 and the Galaxy S7, you see that the Galaxy S7 is about 3 times as fast as the iPhone, but it has the same chip. So people are saying that because Apple uses two different providers, they actually lower the capacity of the Qualcomm chip to make it even with Intel. That makes sense to me. They don't want to have the same kind of problem that they had in the past where one chip was faster or was hotter than the other. So they try to average the different speed to something that is up to their standards. It can always be faster, of course, but maybe that comes in with other factors that this rumor does not take into account. So, for example, heat. I don't know how the Samsung Galaxy S chip is made or positioned. Is there a heatsink on it or not? But if on the iPhone there's no heatsink, you cannot crank this up too high, or else you're going to get some excessive amount of heat. I don't think it's just a matter of. I don't think it's because they just want to make it lower so that Intel doesn't look bad. That's not usually how Apple's rolls. If it was such a big problem, they would probably not even take Intel chip and just use Qualcomm everywhere.
So in other news, Samsung bought Harman Kardon, the speaker company. I think they're a lot more than a speaker company. They do, how is it called? I think they do like car audio, home audio. They do a bunch of stuff. So they bought them for $8 billion. Some people say it's they're trying to do a car-based CarPlay or Android Audio version from Samsung or something like that. So we don't know where that's going to go.
Usually when you have a Harman Kardon system in your car, usually it's more than just speakers. It's actually the whole audio experience. So they usually take the car once it's completely built and they tune in the different speakers and the levels just so that your audio experience is one nice package deal and not just let's put 5 speakers and with our name on it and that's it. It's usually much more than that.
Yeah, it's very high end usually.
Yeah.
High end audio.
But maybe we'll see a car. Maybe it will partner with some Chinese car company to have this in their car. Maybe, like you say, maybe they're trying something with the instead of Android Auto, they would be like Tizen Auto or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they're Korean, so they have a bunch of Korean cars. So we don't know. Maybe there was rumors that it might be something to do with the car because Harman Kardon is so big into cars.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, and also you acquire some engineers and some technologies and some patents, probably for other stuff. Maybe they can bring that back into your phones. Maybe Harman Kardon is not too keen on doing mobile phone speakers, but they probably have something in their labs that can make sense and that they should actually use. So maybe Samsung will leverage that to make the next phone even better.
And I don't know how big Harman Kardon is, but 8 billion is a lot. It's 8 Instagrams.
Yeah, but they've been there for so many years, and
right. I know it's not the same thing as a little app on your phone. There, they have other stuff too, but I find it a lot.
Yep. So that's a good thing for Samsung. So yesterday I posted an article I always wanted to see exactly where are we in the state of photography, comparing mobile phones with their actual counterpart in the DSLR world. So what I did is I took the iPhone 7 Plus and I took my Sony A7 Mark II for a little stroll outside, and I tried to take different pictures of different conditions, like in the shadows, high contrast scenes, high light, like lots of light scenes, also like moving objects. And I tried also the portrait mode of the iPhone 7 Plus with the same thing I would do with my camera to see exactly how both camera compares. Heads up, this is not a scientific test, meaning that my technique was not expected to be perfect because, first of all, I don't have a 28 millimeters 1.8 f1.8 lens with me. I only have a 24 millimeters f4, so it could be even better if I had a 28 millimeters f2.8, but then again, it would also make it like even harder for the iPhone to compete with certain aspects of this lens. So what I did is I tried to use the exact same focal length on both devices. So if I was using the iPhone 7 Plus 28 millimeters wide camera, I would set my lens to 28 millimeters also, and I would let the camera do its magic. So it's basically auto mode if you want, and this way I could exactly see for the same situation both cameras, how do they behave, what do they change to balance the colors or whatever. So the result of this was a not so long in terms of text post, but a quite heavy article, meaning that I took all the pictures and I've put them in one single post, and the total size is about 65 megs. So if you're on your mobile phone and you're listening to this podcast in your podcast app of choice, and you don't have lots of megs left on your bandwidth on your mobile plan, you might want to skip when you're on Wi-Fi. So how I did that? Basically, I added a kind of before and after thingy on our site on Hipster Pixel, where you can see both pictures on top of each other. So what I did is I cropped the pictures to be exactly close to the exact same place, and you can slide from left to right and see exactly the iPhone 7 or the Sony A7 cameras. Basically, there are pictures where the iPhone is much, much better. There are pictures where the Sony camera is much, much better. So it all depends on the different choices that the camera makes. But I was quite surprised at where the iPhone camera is at the moment. Of course, it's the 7 Plus, so you have the added benefit of the portrait mode. But seriously, most of the pictures have better contrast. Most of the pictures also have quite an impressive portraiture when they use the portrait mode, although that they're probably just a bit darker than what the Sony camera can do, which is probably to the fact that it's all software, and the camera itself, it's all light and mirrors and refractions. But other than that, seriously, if I were to put both pictures side by side and ask you which one is which one, for many of them, you would probably get this wrong and think that this picture, which is probably the DSLR, is actually the iPhone, and vice versa. The only place I would say that the iPhone still has lots of problems is in low light. I tried to photograph a figurine in portrait mode inside my house in my staircase, and there you can see that there's way too much noise. It's way too blurry, and it's barely usable. It's like very similar to the old iPhone 4 era type of pictures. So that's exactly why the camera and the portrait mode tells you use more light or move back or get closer, just to get the exact distance and also enough amount of light. Any questions?
I think the biggest difference is in low light pictures, right?
Yep, that's where it really shows that a bigger sensor
picks
on the
up more
DSLR,
stuff.
Yeah, makes more sense.
And also, I find it really amazing that some pictures are like a lot nicer from the iPhone than the Sony. I know that you can go into take the pictures into Photoshop or something and maybe adjust the colors, or maybe it's just me personally that I prefer the more like vibrant, if you want, shots than the Sony that's a bit more flatter maybe. But like you said, since the sensor is bigger and it's taking in more information, I guess there's more to play with or something like that.
Yeah, one thing I could have done is, we know that the iPhone when you take a picture, it takes a bunch of pictures and probably does some calculation with that. For the Sony camera, I did not use the HDR mode where it takes 3 pictures and brings them together to reduce the overexposed and increase the underexposed areas of the photos. This could have made a difference, but I figured that it might just be a way too much, because of course there's this feature and there's other features you can use to get a better quality on your photos. It's especially for the blue skies. If you just put like a polarizer on your lens, you're good to go, and you'll get much nicer blues and less reflections in the windows. But I figured that if the iPhone doesn't have one, I shouldn't take one with the DSLR. It wouldn't be fair. So what the iPhone does is all software. And of course, like you say, if I take a raw pictures from my Sony and use it I was about to say aperture, but if I use it, yeah, I know. Even in photos, if you just play with the settings, you can get some better bluer skies easily. So these were not retouched except for the cropping part, and they were saved with very very low compression, so that I wouldn't get those square pixels or those that refact. So that's why the post is quite big. This was a fun one to do. So I'll probably do it again, maybe in a year or two, and see exactly what happens with the newer cameras.
Yeah, and the slider option is really cool too.
Yeah. This is pretty nice. There's a little handle you can drag from left to right to see the before and after shot, or in this case, the iPhone or Sony A7 shot.
And it works on the phone also.
Yeah. Also, if you ever get to the page and you're at the top and you don't want to consume all your data, no problem for that, because right now there's a lazy loading. So until you scroll down, the pictures won't load. So the page is about 2 meg, I think, with all the assets when it loads. And then once you start scrolling, it starts to download pictures one after the other. So in the end, it gets all the way to about 68 megs. But when you just land on the page, there's no problem with that.
The whole page is 68 megs?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see them coming. Okay, yeah. Cool.
So following my iPhone 7 review I posted last week, I used an app called Disk Bench, and I figured I should probably share that with you guys if you want to get into the gist of your iPhone performance. Basically, it's a SSD testing app. It's going to test the write and read speed of your iPhone or iPod or iPad and report numbers using different methods, meaning that you start the process and then you're going to get average speeds for read and write using the fwrite, the write, the NS data write to URL. And these are 3 different techniques you can use to write data on a phone. Well, 2 different functions if you want. And they usually have different speeds. So this gives you, especially for the developers, an idea of which one should you use to get the best performance out of your app. So I recently also contacted the developer and I provided him with a French translation of his app. So you should see that in the next version. You should get a bunch of more translations. And he added also recently a community tab with the results from the community and exactly the kind of like the Geekbench benchmarks with the different phones and capacities. Because as we learned with Unbox Therapies a few weeks ago, the read-write speed is not the same on the lower capacity model as with the higher capacity model. So this actually shows you the difference. It's a 99-cent app, and it's pretty worth it.
So last week we talked about the NES Classic, and you were all giddy about getting one. I think you had you've had a week now to play with it and show it to your kids how old you are.
Exactly.
So what's the feedback on that?
Nintendo games are hard. Because the feedback I got from them is they're pretty used to the recent Mario games where if you can jump on enemies in a very different types of ways, and if you die too many times, you actually get like a invincibility item when you start back the level. So that's why my kids were able to finish the latest Mario game. They call it Mario with the cats. So in like a weekend, because even though they were keep on dying in one world, they would just get this invincibility item and then they could finish the whole level with no problems. But in the NES games days, there's no such things. So they are still stick on the first level of Super Mario Bros. 3. They got to the second one, but not for long, and they keep on whining that it's so hard and why can't I
Kids these days.
Yeah, they have it so easy. So yes, basically it's a little Linux box hidden inside a plastic shell with 30 games pre-installed. You have all the classics like the Mario games. You've got Ice Climber. You've got Excite Bike, Metroid, all the both first Zelda's games, and everything is in there. The big difference is that since it's an emulation running on a little computer, you can save your state, you can save your progress. You've got 4 slots per game where you can save your progress. So this is much better when you have more than one kid who wants to play the games, because except from Punch Out, Metroid, and and Zelda games, you could not save your state in any way or fashion with passcodes or save games. So if you wanted to play again, you had to start from the beginning. So kids nowadays are not used to that. They are used to either automatically saving progression or at the very least save state after each level or something. So the game itself, they're pretty great, and they're great classics. The emulation is top notch. You've got the same glitch, the same slowdowns that you had in the original console. This was actually impressive. You've got 3 display modes. This is the funniest thing. You can have the old CRT look. So you've got the rectangular pixels instead of being squared. So they can fit a 4:3 screen with the little horizontal scan lines and fuzziness added to that. You have the 4:3 mode, which is clear, which is the same rectangular pixels you had in the time. And then if you want something that is pixel perfect, you can set the 3rd mode, which is pixel perfect mode, where all the pixels are square. So everything in your TV is squished in the middle. And since the characters move less pixels, well, pixels are shorter, so it seems to travel less in terms of distance on your TV. Everything is like slowed down, so it's not super fun. I strongly prefer either a CRT or the 4:3 mode, which are pretty nice. The controller is amazing. It's a Nintendo controller. I haven't taken it apart yet, but from what I've seen on the Reddit threads of people trying to hack the console, it's basically the exact same controller as in the past, with a few small changes. Like, for example, the wire is not soldered to the board directly. It comes into a plastic, I don't know what you call those, but it's where you can just slide in the wires and they get squished by a...
like a RG45 cable?
No, it's more like those iPhone data cable for when you open your iPhone and you remove the screen. Those flat cables, so it kind of fits in that little plastic holder, if you want. So it's this small difference, but it's the only difference because even the screws, they fit the old controllers and vice versa. So if you want to bring old screws to your new NES, you can do it. So. And the only thing I would say that is pretty bad is the wire length. It's only 27 inch, so it's perfect for when you bring the console to your workplace and have your colleagues play on it, which I did last week, and it was quite interesting to see all those guys, mid-30s guys, hanging around my desk just to play the game. And but when you're in your living room, it gets to be a problem. At least the HDMI and USB cables provided are longer, so you can actually connect them to your TV, let the console be on the floor, and push yourself a bit more, not to your couch, but probably sitting in front of your couch, so you can at least play the game with a reasonable distance. But yeah, that's the only downside. Everything else about this little piece of technology is amazing, except that maybe also it's not available anywhere. So that's the bad part. The games are great. 30 games is great. I was hoping we could replace those with maybe 30 other games in the future. But I think this might just be like a one-off, and Nintendo might do a Super NES also in the future with the same kind of technology, because this little box has a 4-core CPU in it, which was probably because this was a cheaper they can get. The cheapest CPU on the market right now it's not necessarily the slower, because at some point when a CPU is not being sold anymore, it's just removed from market. And right now, the cheapest CPU they can get was this 4-core CPU. This can easily run Super NES, Nintendo 64 games, you name it. So yeah, I'm hoping for a new version. I'm also following a thread on Reddit, which I'll put in the show notes, where somebody actually managed to install Linux on top of the existing Linux in there, and he was able to dump the NAND chip memory and look at what was actually installed on this memory chip. So he noticed the 30 blocks for the different 30 games, and 29 blocks were used for the rest of the console. So there's also Linux distro on it, because being open source, you are obligated to provide people with a list of what type of software you're using. So Nintendo Japan released a page that lists all the open source components that they have installed in there. So I'm thinking that since this console is not upgradable, we will eventually find a zero-day exploit on that Linux distro and version, and it will probably be able to jailbreak the NES Classic, which is weird to say, jailbreaking a NES, and then be able to flash the memory with 30 other games, or maybe more. I don't know if there's maybe like some space left on the memory card, on the memory chip. So maybe you can sell maybe 100 games on that and transform this little console into a 500 games in one, like in the old days. Yep, so that's about it for this week. You can find the show notes at rgba.fm/29. And you can find the show notes there. You can find all past episodes too. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and you name it, we're there. All the different podcasting apps of choice, Overcast, Pocket Cast, so many. There's a bunch of them. Look in the footer of RGBA.fm to see all of them. You can find us on Twitter. I'm Valia, VALLIERES.
And I'm Tyler Menard, TYLERMENARD.
And you can follow the podcast account at _RGBAfm. All right, so have a nice week.
Bye.